What's up, guys? Sorry for being a little bit late. USC game, learned a lot from the tape. We're really close on some plays, but when you're playing a opponent of that magnitude, everything's got to be perfect, and we just weren't there that night. I thought the kids competed extremely tough. Players were resilient the whole night. Whether you watch the first snap or the last snap, you wouldn't know the difference in the score. There's players playing hard, so that was the best takeaway. Obviously, no one's excited or happy with the outcome. We know we have to continue to move and work to that direction. But first practice for Utah week is today, so getting ready to gear up for that. And I know it's going to be a packed house, and players are going to be juiced up, and it'll be a fun one. So let's go with some questions.
Jason Walker with Cash Philly Daily. You've talked about this offense you guys have being explosive and hard to stop. What were the things that went wrong against USC to where that didn't really show up on the scoreboard?
Well, I think it's just hard with that type of defense. They're obviously extremely talented. It's hard to sustain 8 to 15 play drives. If you look at the rushing stats, Razul was over, I think, 6 or 7 yards a carry, and Herschel was at 4.8. So we ran the ball pretty well. It's just hard to continually do it every single snap. As soon as you get behind the sticks, it was just too tough to overcome. Their pass rush did a good job. I thought O-line competed the best we have. Even listening to Coach Bassett, maybe since we've been here. But it just comes down to, a block here or there could have sprung something. Razul almost took the first play of the second half, 80 yards, right? But we just barely got tripped up. So everything is just amplified when you're playing top level talent. And hats off to USA. I thought they were really well coached as well.
This is John Kuhn from the Associated Press. Bryson Barnes obviously has a history with Utah. He was their starting quarterback last year when Cam Rising was out. What have you seen from Bryson since he's joined your program up there? I mean, how's he progressed as a leader and as a quarterback?
The first thing that always comes to my mind with Bryson is toughness, whether it's mental or physical. He is a very hard-nosed player, and in my mind, and I said this a lot, you win championships with a great defense and a tough quarterback. And we know we have a tough quarterback. He always prepares like he's a starter. And just like the Robert Morris game, he came in as the backup, but didn't miss a beat and finished with a ton of yards in the air and on the ground. So he gives you a lot with his athleticism on what you can do in some QB run games, which is hard to prepare for. But even more so, I think the way he carries himself, he has so much confidence that kind of the players feed off of, and it's contagious. So it's going to be whichever quarterback comes out there, but I'm sure Bryson will get some snaps, and he's fired up for this week, obviously.
Jason Walker again. You mentioned the offensive line. I kind of want to bring this up where when USC only rushed like 4 guys, the offensive line stood up pretty well, but USC brought a lot of blitzes and got a lot of pressure off those blitzes. Is there anything you guys need to tweak on that end as far as picking up blitzes, or was that just maybe a one-game execution thing?
Well, it's more to it than that, and I completely agree. O-line did an unbelievable job. I think Bryson had a lot of time. Obviously, it's hard versus anybody, whether it's USC or any high school in Cache Valley here. If it's third and long a lot, they're going to be teeing off and they're going to have a great pass rush, right? So it's not more so the O-line not holding up versus the pressure. It's more so offensively being able to stay ahead of the stick so we don't get in that situation. Then you throw in the fact that USC maybe has a couple of the best pass rushers in the country. It's tough. So when we were ahead of the sticks and it was 3rd and 3, those drives were rolling and moving, right? But when it's 3rd and 9, that's just too hard.
Eileen, Jason Turner from the Herald Journal. Just, you said some good things came up on film, so I just wanted to ask you, after going over that film, what are some of the things, more than anything, you feel that you can build on?
Well, first I'll continue with the offense. I thought our run game was phenomenal. Probably could have ran it a little bit more. Hats off to the offensive line and the tailbacks. They played their butts off and they strained. Defensively, we're close on some things. We just didn't have the details that we needed. They knew the scheme. They trusted it. We just kind of panicked a little bit out of the gate. And by that point, it was too hard to catch up. But you saw some good football in the second quarter when we were calmed down and playing our type of style, right? It's what we want. And, we had I think the score was 20-0 with 2 minutes to go in the first half, and we had the ball to chance to make it a 20-7 game, and we get the ball coming out of halftime. Then it just gets a pick pass and an interception. It was just that type of night. Like, we needed things to go right, and obviously ending the first half with that in that taste in your mouth is tough. But it was close, man. It was a lot closer than you'd think if you just look at the scoreboard. But everything has to go perfect in those games. But more so, we're just going to continue to harp on the details, being ourselves, right, and sticking with our identity.
Patrick Mayhorn with the Ag Ship. What have you learned about the importance of this rivalry that you've got coming up on Saturday in your brief time being here?
Well, I think the funnest part about it is there's going to be players camping out or fans camping out on Wednesday and Thursday already. So it's going to be hectic. I'm sure there's going to be some red in the stands, but hopefully not much. I think it's just listening to my neighbors and the people around town, might be the most packed Maverick Stadium's been in a long, long time. So both teams are going to be fired up. I wish they played this game every single year, but anytime you have an in-state game, an hour and a half away coming up, especially a Power 4 opponent, like this is why you want to come to Utah State to play these types of games in this environment in Maverick Stadium. So it's going to be a fun one.
Adding Branson.
Oh, go ahead, Eric.
Hey, Patrick.
Okay. Adding on to that, when you're preparing for a game like this, obviously you talk a lot about controlling what you can control, just focusing on you. How do you balance that with the energy that comes with a game where this means a lot to a lot of the guys on the team? How do you balance those two things?
I think the important thing is making sure we control our emotions, right? We know we're going to be amped up. Everyone on this team was probably hoping they got recruited by Utah, but probably didn't, right? So we know that our players are going to have that chip on their shoulder of wanting to prove to themselves, right, that they can play at the highest level. And then that gets thrown in on having the game here at home. So we know the energy is going to be unbelievable, but it's also making sure you still play inside yourself and in this system. We don't need you to do anything special. We just need you to do your job to a high level of detail. And if we can keep that energy and that concentration, right, that's when greatness happens.
Coach Eric Franson with 106.9 The Fan. It's I guess we don't really know the status of Cam Rising just yet for this game, but if it is a true freshman quarterback, does that change much how you approach trying to attack them defensively?
I don't know. Obviously he was very highly recruited out of Corner Canyon, out of high school. So it's funny, they go from the oldest quarterback in the country to probably the youngest. But you still have to cover them. They still have extreme talent on the outside. Obviously, Utah wants to run the ball. Everyone knows that. So you have to be able to hold up in the run game. But then they have probably one of the best tight ends in the country. They have unbelievable skill at wide receiver. So it's not like you can just put 9 in the box and just ignore everybody, right? You can punt the ball to some of these guys. They're so fast. So it's still being able to play sound in the run game. But ultimately we have to finish our one-on-ones on the back end, regardless of the quarterback.
Jason Walker again, just kind of on the subject of injuries. How close are Spencer Petras and also Tavo Motuapawaka? How close are they to coming back?
Yeah, Spencer's going to have a legit chance of playing. We thought we'd maybe have him last week, but just didn't progress as fast as we want. But he's out throwing right now, and he's looking good. So hopefully we'll have both quarterbacks available. And then Tavo, he's still getting day to day. He's going to practice today for the first time in a while, so I'll know more on that question sooner rather than later. But hopefully we can get full force. We're going to need everyone to pull this one off. But regardless, kind of what I said last week, whoever's in that quarterback, both guys are tough and confident, and everybody loves tough and confident quarterbacks.
Riley and Jason Turner from the Herald Journal. Utah was one of the best teams last year in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback, averaged almost 3 sacks a game. They're averaging 4 per game this year. What do you see from those, from their scheme or just their edge rushers in general that makes them so effective?
Well, they're extremely well coached. I think if you look at, what they've done on defense the last 10 years, it's probably up there with just about anybody in the country, whether it's run game or pass rush. But why? I think they play the run probably better than any team in the country. So what are they in? They're in 3rd and 8 and 3rd and 9 all the time, and now they have pass rushers that can roll off the edge. So it goes to a lot more than just being able to rush the passer. They earn the right to rush the passer because of how well they play the run. So for us to avoid the 3 sacks like you're talking about, it's going to be back on the O line, the tailbacks. Can we get to 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4 instead of 2nd and 9, right? And that leads to a 3rd and short or a 3rd and long. That's what the game's going to come down to.
Coach Dryling, this is Ashley Doors with the Just Statesman. You kind of touched on this a little bit earlier about how Maverick Stadium has that sort of energy. Do you predict a shift in the energy since now 1,000 student section seats are being sold as general admission?
Do I predict a shift? No, I think the herd is going to be absolutely crazy like they always are. Last game was obviously my first one here, and these fans are out there an hour and a half. They got on the field before I even got on the field, and they're loaded up, clapping, booing the other team as they drop passes. So whether it's one person in the herd or it's 20,000, it's literally the greatest, maybe the greatest student section in all of college football, and they're going to be rowdy. There's no doubt about it. Any other questions?
Yeah, I got one. Patrick Mayhorn again from the Ag Ship. You slowed things down a little bit on the offense against USC, tried to limit some snaps. Do you plan to do that here as well, or do you want to go a little bit more up tempo for this one?
Yeah, still working through that. Offensively, they have the option to do both, right? They have a lot of tempos in their arsenal. So it's going to be kind of pick and choose, whether it's matchup based, right? But probably too early to tell on what tempo they're going to do consistently. But it's going to be hard now. Teams got to prepare for a couple different ones.
This is Jason Walker with Cash Relay Daily. As we just start with the rivalry playing Utah this week, what's it like for you guys to be kind of renewing the Battle of the Brothers?
I think it's extremely exciting. You know, when I saw that they came out with that news, I was extremely fired up. Same with everybody else. You know, growing up here in Utah, the Utes are obviously a big deal. You know, I went to Syracuse. A lot of my friends, a lot of coaches were all Ute fans. So I'm really excited to kind of bring that back and put on a good show this Saturday.
Eric Franson with 106.9 The Fan. You went up against a big team last week in USC. You're going to face another big defensive team this week with Utah. Similarities or differences between the two that you've spotted so far?
I think honestly the biggest similarity is they're both going to play extremely hard. I mean, USC played extremely hard, and I think that was great for us to kind of feel that as an offensive line. And I think it's really going to actually prepare us for this Saturday and just being able to come out and kind of know what to expect.
This is Jason Walker again. USC blitzed a lot against you guys. You guys had some struggles in protecting Bryson Barnes when they blitzed. What are some of the things you guys maybe learned in that game, and what do you want to try and improve when Utah? I'm sure they'll blitz a lot as well, try and take advantage of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, they brought as much as they could, and we had a total of 3 sacks on the game. 2 of them were kind of more procedural things. The only one that was like a true sack was just a pure one-on-one. And so I think, you know, as we're watching film, it kind of makes us feel good in a sense that, you know, these guys are some of the top pass rushers in the country, and we were able to hold them down for, you know, a minimum of 3. And so coming into this game, you know, just watching, you know, the film from USC and kind of seeing what we can do as a technician standpoint and kind of understanding where we could go from here and what we could do better for Utah. So, I mean, we're super excited. I think the offensive line especially is super confident in our pass protection for Bryson. So we're extremely excited to go in and learn this week and hopefully, you know, 0 sacks this week. So.
Jason Walker again. Kind of on a similar note, I know you guys get to run the ball a ton, but I mean your running backs average like 5 or 6 yards per carry. So obviously some positives in you guys' ability to go up against these defensive linemen, USC and potentially Utah.
Right. No, I mean we feel confident regardless if we're going to run the ball or if we need to pass for Bryson. As we go through practice this week, I think we're going to make a pretty big emphasis on both things, and make sure we're good on both the run and the pass game for sure.
Eric Franson again. Just the 7 years of eligibility. Can you just talk about that and just your length of tenure at Utah State and ups and downs associated with that, and getting one more year to go out there and finish off strong?
Yeah, no, I think it's truly a blessing for me. Last year was my first real opportunity to start for the Aggies. And so having this extra year is just honestly truly a blessing for me because I get to put, more film out there for, potential future of playing longer and stuff. But, I've had a really good time here. I've learned a lot tremendously, even growing as a person and being able to experience a lot of different football teams and, meeting everyone that I have. So, it's honestly just been truly a blessing for me.
This is Ashley Doris with the Statesman. This is the first game we're playing against Utah since 2015, and the first time it's back at the Maverick Stadium since 2012, so that's over 10 years ago. How do you feel about this team being the representative against Utah with this decade since we've last seen them here?
Yeah, like I said, I think everybody's just extremely excited. I think a lot of the Utah boys, kids growing up here in Utah. Like I said, growing up, nobody, from my high school, you never really heard about, Utah State. It was always Utah or BYU. So I think everyone is just extremely excited to have them come up, and we just want to be able to put on, the best performance that we can for this Saturday.
Anything else for Wyatt?
Yeah, one more thing. Part of the reason why it's so cool is that, once again, it's the first time in a decade that they're coming up here instead of us going down to them. However, obviously there's been a major shift in the way the herd will be present because of the 1,000 seats being sold off. Do you have any comments on that?
Me personally, I try and stay out of, everything going on outside of football like that per se. I really try and focus on what I'm doing and what the offense line is doing. I have seen what they're doing with the tickets. And I mean, the only thing I can say is, the USU herd is a really big part of, the stadium and something that I personally enjoy quite a bit. So, I mean, whatever they can do to get those kids in there would be awesome. But
this is Jason Walker with Cash Valley Daily. Coming off a game where you give up 48 points, what are the biggest areas of improvements you guys are trying to make for this upcoming game against Utah?
I guess, after meeting this morning, Coach Drilling always came to us and we emphasized that we had to be big on stopping the run. So I think that's where a lot of our effort and, responsibilities needs to be towards that. But, being out there, I hope, people saw that we show tremendous effort. We always, have hats to the ball, and, we don't lay down easily. We will show fight to the end,
Hi, Eric Franson with 106.9 The Fan. Just your, I guess, observations of the environment at USC, going up against their offense, but then also trying to take lessons from that to prepare for another big opponent this Saturday.
Come from USC, great team. We won't give all the respect. We tried to do the best we could, and like I said, I hope it showed. But at the same time, coming in the new week, we got to go to mindset. We're 0-0 now. We're going to focus on Utah. They got a lot of great athletes again. It's another big test for us, and we'll be ready by the end of the week.
From the Associated Press, when you face back-to-back power conference opponents like this, as a defense, what can it do for you in terms of your progression going into Mountain West play? What kind of things can you learn from playing Power 5 competition that maybe you don't learn from playing an FCS school or a G5 school?
You know, I always have my trust in Coach Allen. He always creates a great scheme for us. And you know, the biggest thing, you know, we talked about again this morning, consistency. We got to be consistent what we do in the plays. You know, we have a couple hiccups, and then obviously results to big plays. So you know, we just got to keep our heads down in the playbook, you know, just preparing each week, you know, for our new opponents.
Hi, Jason Turner from the Herald Journal. You guys did progressively get better in run defense as the game progressed on Saturday. The second half was a lot better than the first half. So I guess ultimately, what adjustments did you make, or was it just a matter of gaining confidence? What were the biggest changes that you made that allowed for those improvements?
I would say, you know, just gaining confidence. You know, we can tell, you know, we had to wake up towards, you know, the second half. You know, I feel, you know, I didn't play the best I could. You know, I tried to make everything possible. Brought in a big huddle defense. You know, we had a little chat, and it was like, yo, you know, it's going to be competition. This is what we prepare for, and we had a little inspirational speech after that, and then we came out. You know, we was more locked in, and you know, it was this mindset to get better and better.
Hi, Derek Franson with 106.9 The Fan again. This is a team that you're on that has more than 36 players from Utah, either at high school or played at another institution in the state. What are you feeling from your teammates about this game and just the sense of the rivalry? It's been a long time since these two teams have faced each other.
You know, being new here, I'm trying to adapt to everybody's you know, rivalry and how they talk about Utah. But they probably say this is, you know, one of the games they're looking for, and it's going to mean, you know, the world to Logan, and they're ready to play. We're going to do everything in our power, you know, in our scheme, and just bring it back. Like, go out there, play as tough as USC, and you know, they run it back. You know, 12 personnel. They try to air it out. They got a good running scheme too as well, but they just gonna have to match our energy and our competitive.
Hey, Clyde, with that, kind of piggybacking off of it, obviously this is your first season with Utah State. You transfer in from Purdue, doing great there. How do you feel about playing for Utah State in comparison, especially when it comes to like fans and all of that?
You know, I give all respect to Purdue. Love the fans over there. Love the coaches over there. But you know, I just needed more opportunity, more a chance. So you know, I decided to separate from them. But coming here, you know, they welcomed me with open arms, and couldn't be more blessed to be here. I feel like this is the right place for me. Obviously, I hope I show that, you know, to all the fans out there, and I'm gonna keep working.